Welcome to this week's Aiding Your Game, our web series where we talk all things RPGs, focus mostly on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. However, most of the content you can utilize for different RPGs that you could be playing. In this week's video, we're going to be talking about game worlds, specifically creating and utilizing the game worlds for your system. Now, before we jump into the video, make sure you go down and hit that subscribe button to help us grow. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content. If you don't mind the notifications, be sure to hit that bell so you know when we're posting new content. Be sure to share with your friends and others you may enjoy RPGs with. And if you have questions, comments, or want to provide any feedback to us for content that we produce, be sure to leave a comment down below. Now, because we focus primarily on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the content in this video is specifically designed for that. However, you can use some of the information that we're going to be talking about in this video for other game systems, as well as other genres and RPG systems. Now, if you're a GM, you've most likely gone through the Dungeon Master's Guide and seen that there's quite a bit of information about creating worlds of your own. And this is nothing new specifically for D&D 5e. In fact, nothing new specifically for Dungeons & Dragons as a whole. Many game worlds and genres that we know and love have multiverses. You've probably heard the saying of multiverse specifically from comics or comic movies like Marvel, but multiverse thought process goes way back and is supported in a lot of different genres where there is public input or public play and experience in creative realms. For instance, with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the adventures and the game is set in the Forgotten Realms. However, what happens in the official rules, once you begin to play and ultimately have your adventuring party or parties inhabit that world and interact with that world, this could change some of the beings and things that are happening in that world, in that game setting. Ultimately, this is great and this is fine, and that's what the game is built for. However, it doesn't affect what happens in the official materials, just like it doesn't affect what happens in a nearby table that's also playing in the Forgotten Realms. Now, this type of multiverse means that there are billions of Forgotten Realms systems that are out there and in existence all at once, and what happens in one may not affect what happens in another. The same is true of all of the different game systems that have been introduced through Dungeons & Dragons as well as other RPGs. Now, this is great for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, you have a great amount of lore that you can draw on to bring your world to life. Likewise, it gives you a good idea to be able to allow your players and their characters to kind of know and understand what's happening in the game world around them. If, for instance, you're playing along the Sword Coast, whatever's happening in the adventure setting of Icewind Dale, the players and their characters should be somewhat aware of it. It may affect them, and if you're working on multiple campaigns, it allows you the agency to let your campaigns play off and feed one another. On the flip side of that coin, whatever's happening along your Sword Coast may not become official and canon and won't be recognized by everybody else that's also playing along the Sword Coast, or who's tackling different issues in Icewind Dale. However they were to confront and take part in the Icewind Dale module, Rime of the Frost Maiden, may have very little to no impact on your game's world whatsoever. Now, because you have that rich lore as you're building forward and progressing your stories, that content that you have a good base of and can pull from for inspiration and lore and storytelling ideas, opportunity for adventure and creation, also doesn't require you to utilize all of it. If, for instance, your players are hoping that they get a chance to confront Xanthar, you could ultimately decide that Xanthar in your Forgotten Realms is a figment of everybody's imagination, and instead of Xanthar, you could have a completely different creature pulling the strings. Having the agency to create a world of your own is something that the game system not only allows for, but really encourages. Thus, the large section in the Dungeon Master's Guide of creating a world of your own. Now, if you're not utilizing the published materials or setting your game in the Forgotten Realms world, and you want to create a world of your own, obviously the Dungeon Master's Guide is the best place to start your foot in the door. With all of the information that you need to really start a world building concept and creative process, it's going to walk you through different scales. It's going to give you ideas and guidelines on what the game system is really designed for and how some of the tools that are used in modules are actually used by GMs who've created the world of the Forgotten Realms. And of course, by utilizing these tools, you're going to be able to build a world of your own that's going to be just as full of lore and opportunity as the Forgotten Realms is to the general public. Now, myself, like most GMs, do have a world that you've built from kind of the ground up, let's say. My world of Earth really started coming into being in the early 90s, late 80s. And from that time, most of the games that I've GM'd have occurred on my world of Earth. I've utilized the games that I've played to help build lore and discover more and more about what I want my world and how I want my game setting to be. That allows me the opportunity to really tell characters what the world around them is like, what type of world their characters grew up in and are going to be adventuring in, as well as letting my players know that there is a whole world for them to explore through their characters. So it really opens the gates for them to be able to pick and choose what kind of collaborative storytelling we're going to be working on together. And while I utilize a lot of the same campaign themes and settings over and over again to help build out my experience and really encapsulate the things that I love to present to players as well as lay out for characters to overcome, each session that I run, I'm able to build out a little bit more opportunity for lore building, story building, and world building. When a great campaign or session goes on, the content of that is really built into my world's lore. As a longtime GM, I've had to move through a lot of different editions of the game, as well as a number of different parties and party makeups. Now, I've utilized all of these changes to build more and more into my world lore. For instance, when I started building my world, I was playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and while I don't want to use this video to get into any edition wars whatsoever, because I utilized that game world for quite some time in gaming, when 2nd edition came out, it really had an impact on the type of characters that I was running through the game world, as well as what they wanted to use. Now, there were different skills that they wanted to focus more on, and they wanted to utilize the characters to the best of the abilities that they could. Adjusting for these changes in the edition rules, I started to come up with an idea of why would these changes occur. So, going back to some of my early inspiration, all the way back to Thundar the Barbarian, when you see a comet whiz past the planet and crack the moon, came up with an idea that with the edition, that's kind of what happened. There was a massive occurrence that happened that kind of upturned the world, and I was able to almost start fresh. What happened in 1st edition gameplay at my tables became a thing of legend and lore. That still allowed me to use a lot of the things that I created, from locations and strong personalities that possibly could have survived, but it twisted them enough to where things that were new at the time were now kind of buried and hidden and broken. And it almost gave it a complete new life. These figures of lore and legend who were rumored to be around really weren't the epicenter of the games that I was playing. Likewise, for a third edition, the same occurrence happened. And each edition, I was able to adapt my world to the new kind of structure and ideas that were changing somewhat in the rules. And ultimately now for 5th edition, now this world is in at least its 5th age, which for me allows me to go all the way back to the first age and still reuse some of the initial things that I had built, some of the initial characters that have wandered around in this world and made a name for themselves. Now it's just distant memory, but I'm able to reuse and recycle some of the things and still get a lot of great content and shared collaborative storytelling with my players. And like so many game worlds, when I started creating, I actually started on a province scale and started scaling up until I had my entire world. This allowed me the opportunity, as I was building my world, to really focus on a small area and then expand as the adventures started to expand. If I needed a new location that had to be extremely alien, I was able to go all the way around the globe for new adventure ideas, new adventure locations, new plot hooks, and ultimately giving that feeling of strangeness and alienation to the characters in the campaign. Additionally, with world building, a lot of the ideas and locations and kind of themes in my world have evolved from things that have really inspired me. I highly recommend you do the same. Just to give an example, one area that I've used a number of times actually comes from the movie Dragon Slayer. The area is very, I would guess you would say, Ireland or Northern Europe in topography and how it's kind of laid out and set up. It's very low magic because they're kind of cut off from the rest of the world. I didn't want areas of high magic to be able to influence, but they do have a dragon problem. To overcome this dragon problem, they have annual sacrifices to this dragon. Blatant ripoff of Dragon Slayer. But this allowed me the agency to build something that was really inspiring to me into my world and think about how it sat in the world. I knew it had to be away from strong powers of magic because I do have a medium-high magic level in my world. So topography became very important, as well as the people who are there. Why would they not move to a higher area with more magic and more protection and all of this? So really thinking about that led me to design the topography to fit the narrative of Dragon Slayer. And in the same world, I do have large floating islands where there are previous cloud giants and current cloud giants. And this really allows me the opportunity to have these fantastic differences in my game world and still be able to let the players as well as their characters know that there are going to be these pockets, these different areas, this large world with lots of variation. Again, this gives them the opportunity to kind of pick and choose what's going to interest the players to keep them coming to the table, what's going to be different and unique, and how can they have their characters interact with that, and what does that mean for the world at large. Now, as you're creating your game worlds, again, I highly recommend starting small and building up. If you're a GM who's already created an entire game world and really fleshed it out and felt it through, don't hesitate to look at opportunities to make big changes and look for ways to really bring it back into a new and discoverable area. If you're extremely familiar with your area, that's great because it really allows you to sell it and let it become a living, breathing part of your campaign and your gaming table. Just don't anticipate that everybody is going to have the same level of understanding, buy-in, appreciation, and most notably, knowledge. I would never ask any of my players to read the lore and history and the entirety of the world of a Earth where we play. But one thing I do to help them is if they're needing some type of knowledge or local lore or anything like that, dealing with the history or evolution of the planet and the world that I've built, I just have them roll a skill check and then I give them just that information that could be impactful. Sometimes they want to hear more and they want to learn more, and that's great. I don't hesitate sharing any of that information with my players. Happy to provide it. But at the same time, I don't want to overwhelm them with something that they may not be as invested in the world at large as they are just a hack and slash dungeon delving adventure. So world building as a whole, in my opinion, is extremely important for a dungeon master. Whether you're playing in your own game world or you're playing in a published game world, such as the Forgotten Realms, one of the most important things you as a GM can do as a service to your players and your table is be familiar with your world lore. By designing your world from the ground up and really fleshing areas out, even if you're starting small and working big, or working large and then going into the locality, having a good grip and understanding of the powerhouses and way of life and types of civilizations really helps, because as your players are using their characters to explore your world, by fleshing things out and making it seem more real, being able to describe things in detail and give a lay of the land really allows them to connect and focus with the game world. If everything is just a fog beyond 60 feet, why would they ever want to leave anything of comfort? If it's all unknown and things don't make sense, it can be a little more challenging for them to buy in and continue to engage, not only with the story, but with the game world at large. NPCs take on less of a meaning if there's no drive behind them, if they're just there to populate the page or to be flowers in a field, without some type of understanding of why they're there and how they're there and what kind of impact that has on the community as well as the world as a whole. Again, in my opinion, just does a disservice to the table and makes it a little more challenging for players to have that buy-in and get those emotional connections to the story, to the NPCs, to the plot, and to the game world. When your players believe and are emotionally connected to your game world, you'll find the way they operate their characters, the impacts they want their characters to have on those communities that you've built is going to have a dramatic shift in not only tone, but level of immersion. Now, we've already done some videos on creating a map and starting in a province area. I'll try to put some links of those at the end of this video. As a reminder, again, the Dungeon Master's Guide is a great starting point if you haven't already started world building. The DM's Guide is a fantastic place to start. Now, if you are using published worlds, again, don't hesitate to go and look up things like the wikis for the Forgotten Realms. There is so much beyond just Icewind Dale and the Sword Coast. If you're wanting to move your characters in a different direction, give them something fresh and new, and really allow the world to be their oyster, there is a lot of great information that's already been written that, because of the way we use multiverses, you can switch, you can change, you can update, you can make it your own. And by understanding that, you're able to create more towards your favorite style of play, your player's favorite style of play, as well as meet expectations on what both the characters are hoping to get out of their adventuring lives, as well as the players to get out of their time at your table. As the name indicates, in Dungeon Master, you as the GM really need to be that master and create and drive and shape the world, the experiences, the peoples that your players' characters are going to be encountering, experiencing, interacting with, and ultimately shaping with their own storytelling. Not only is it great for seeing it come to life at your table, but it's also a great way to be creative, utilize some different thoughts and approaches in how you would create different areas in a world, and is a great way to express yourself not only through the notes and maps and details that you take, but to other people. Additionally, as you're creating your game worlds, if you play multiple systems like I do, utilizing some of those worlds in different RPG settings can be fantastic as well. Think of any type of sci-fi adventure, whether it be Star Wars, Star Trek, Star Frontiers, Battlestar Galactica. Being able to go to worlds that you're familiar with are a fantastic opportunity to continue being creative, be overly creative, and make more content than you need for one game system. And it allows you to, again, understand, know, and be able to pass the details on of your creativity to your players and their characters. Again, making it more real, more able to be emotionally connected to, and with bigger impact to the storytelling. Keep those creative juices flowing. I'd love to hear below in the comments worlds that you've created, areas that you've created, or even just opportunities that you've created utilizing different inspiration or information out of the Dungeon Master's Guide and any other published materials out there. Let me know what inspired you, how it inspired you, and ultimately how you saw it come to fruition at your gaming tables. And what did your players and the characters make of your creation? From my world to yours, I hope you have fantastic adventures. I hope you enjoyed that video. Here's a link to another video that you may enjoy. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button to help us grow. If you'd like to support us, make sure you check out the description of the video with some links and leave a comment to let us know where will your adventures take you.